A billionaire, drowning in his wealth yet plagued by insecurities, decided to test the loyalty of his wife in the most twisted way. He pretended to be paralyzed, hoping it would reveal her true feelings. But what happened next shocked him to his core and flipped his entire world upside down. Nathaniel Stone had built an empire from the ground up. A self-made billionaire, he had everything most people could ever dream of: luxury homes, private jets, a fleet of cars, and a power that spanned continents. Yet, despite the world at his feet, there was one thing he couldn't control: his insecurities. Nathaniel had always been a driven man, but the higher he climbed, the more paranoid he became. His wife Olivia was beautiful, intelligent, and the love of his life. She had been with him since the beginning, long before the wealth, the fame, and the power. Together they had 2 children and a perfect life, or so it seemed. But behind his smile and success, Nathaniel had one lingering fear: that Olivia might leave him. Despite the years of loyalty and love she had shown, something inside him told him that one day she might grow tired of him, of his wealth, or of the life they led. Nathaniel's mind often wandered to darker places. Was Olivia with him because of love, or was she merely enjoying the luxuries his success afforded her? Had she stayed through the years because she loved him, or had she simply grown accustomed to the comfort and status? Every glance she shared with another man, every word she spoke to a colleague, felt like a dagger to his fragile sense of security. The more he thought about it, the more he convinced himself that he needed to prove something. His paranoia began to consume him. After a sleepless night, a disturbing thought crossed his mind. What if he tested her? What if he could create a situation that would reveal her true feelings? That's when it hit him. He would fake a tragedy. Pretending to be paralyzed would force Olivia to take care of him, to be by his side through the most vulnerable and humbling time in his life. If she stayed, it would be proof that she truly loved him, beyond the luxury and riches. But if she left, it would confirm his darkest fear: she was only with him for the money, not the man. And so Nathaniel set his plan into motion. With his wealth, connections, and a network of doctors at his disposal, he orchestrated the perfect setup: a staged accident that would make him appear paralyzed and in need of constant care. What he didn't expect was that this test would turn his life upside down, revealing not just Olivia's loyalty, but secrets that would shatter him in ways he never imagined. Nathaniel's plan was set in motion. The accident was staged perfectly. He had arranged for a minor car crash, one that would result in an injury severe enough to require immediate hospitalization, but not life-threatening. The doctors on his payroll were more than willing to play their part. They made sure that Olivia would be told he had suffered a spinal injury, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. When Olivia received the news, it was as though the ground had been pulled out from under her. She rushed to the hospital, her heart pounding in her chest, dread building with every step. She knew Nathaniel had been busy with meetings, but she never expected this. Walking into the sterile hospital room, she found her husband lying in a bed, a somber look on his face, his body stiff and unmoving. His eyes, once full of life and ambition, now seemed dull, almost hollow. He looked up at her with a faint smile, but his gaze was too intense, too searching. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice weak but steady, "I need you. I can't do this without you." Olivia's heart sank. She knew Nathaniel well. He was always in control, always the one who led. Seeing him like this, so vulnerable and helpless, stirred something deep within her. She felt a wave of compassion mixed with confusion. Why was this happening now? She had never seen him so broken, so fragile. As she sat by his bedside, holding his hand, her mind raced. The doctors assured her that Nathaniel's condition could improve with time and that he would need constant care and support. But a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't quite add up. Nathaniel's injury, though severe, didn't explain the deep sense of urgency in his eyes. Why had he never mentioned anything about a potential health problem? Why the sudden need for her undivided attention? Over the next few days, Olivia dedicated herself to caring for him. She adjusted her schedule, canceled meetings, and put her own work aside. She helped him with everything, feeding him, changing his clothes, even moving him from one bed to another. But as she did, the mystery behind Nathaniel's accident gnawed at her. His emotional intensity, the way he was constantly observing her every move, started to feel almost suffocating. He was too eager for her presence, too desperate for reassurance. Olivia had always been the steady one in their relationship. She had supported him through every business deal, every triumph, and every setback. But now she was beginning to question if this was truly an accident, or if it was something much darker, something calculated. She felt a growing sense of unease. Was Nathaniel testing her? And if so, why? What had caused him to doubt her love? The tension between them grew with every passing day. Nathaniel's neediness became more apparent, his insecurity more suffocating. And Olivia, despite her devotion, found herself questioning not only his intentions, but her own feelings. She had always loved him, but this sudden shift felt like a betrayal of everything they had built together. But Olivia wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. Nathaniel, locked in his own head, began to fear the worst. He watched her closely, waiting for signs of disappointment, impatience, or frustration. Every time she left the room for a moment, he wondered if she was sneaking away to meet someone else, if she was losing interest in him. The more Nathaniel analyzed her, the more obsessed he became. His plan was supposed to be simple: test her loyalty, see if she'd stay, and confirm his suspicions. But what he didn't anticipate was how his own insecurities would escalate, or how this twisted game would unravel both of them in ways neither of them could have predicted. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Nathaniel had underestimated the toll his plan would take on both of them. At first, Olivia stayed by his side, attending to his every need with the care and dedication she had always shown. But as the days turned into weeks, the weight of the situation began to wear on her. The constant vigilance, the pressure to be his sole caretaker, it was taking its toll on her. Nathaniel, meanwhile, was growing increasingly agitated. His once calm demeanor had been replaced by an anxious, almost paranoid energy. Every time Olivia left the room for a few minutes, whether it was to grab a cup of coffee or to make a phone call, his mind raced with thoughts of betrayal. He could feel himself slipping deeper into the spiral of distrust that had consumed him for so long. Olivia noticed the change in him. His eyes no longer held the same warmth they once did. They were clouded with suspicion, almost accusatory. She had always known Nathaniel to be confident, even arrogant at times, but now he seemed fragile, broken. She tried to reassure him, but every attempt felt like it was falling short. No matter what she said or did, it never seemed enough. His neediness grew, and with it, a tension that had begun to crack the foundation of their relationship. One evening, as Olivia was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Nathaniel called out to her from the living room. His voice sounded strange, almost too calm, as if he were holding something back. "Olivia," he said softly, "can you come here for a moment?" She walked into the room, wiping her hands on a towel. Nathaniel was sitting in his chair, his face unreadable. For a moment she felt a chill run down her spine. She had learned to read his moods over the years, but this was different. There was a quiet intensity in the air, a palpable sense of unease. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "I need to ask you something," he said. Have you been meeting someone else while I'm here?" The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. She blinked, her breath catching in her throat. It was as if the ground beneath her feet had disappeared. She had expected many things from Nathaniel, but this was a new low, a direct accusation, born from his unfounded fears. "Of course not," she said quickly, trying to hide the hurt in her voice. "Nathaniel, you know I would never do that." But Nathaniel didn't seem convinced. "Then why do you keep leaving? Why do you look at your phone so much? You've been distant, Olivia. I can feel it." Olivia's heart sank. She had tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, to keep things together for the sake of their family, but now the cracks were too wide to ignore. Her mind raced with thoughts of how things had gotten this far. Why was Nathaniel behaving this way? Why was he pushing her away with his constant accusations? "I'm just trying to help," Olivia said, her voice trembling with frustration. "You need rest. You're going through something difficult, and I'm here for you. But I can't do this if you keep questioning me." Nathaniel stared at her, his eyes cold. "I'm not the one questioning you. You're the one who's changed. You used to be different. I need to know that you're still here, that you haven't forgotten about us, about me." The words stung, but they weren't new. Nathaniel had always been demanding, always wanted more. But this was different. His need for validation, his constant doubts, everything about it felt manipulative. And Olivia knew it. The more she gave, the more he took. The more he pushed, the further she felt herself slipping away from him. As the days went on, Olivia began to retreat emotionally. She couldn't bear the constant barrage of questions, the subtle accusations, the emotional blackmail. She found herself dreading the moments when she would return to the hospital room, where Nathaniel's eyes would follow her every move, where his words would be laced with doubt. Her empathy for him was being eroded by his relentless need for reassurance. But Nathaniel wasn't aware of how much he was pushing her away. The more Olivia withdrew, the more his fears festered, growing larger and more irrational. He couldn't see that his need for control, his test of loyalty, was suffocating the very relationship he was trying to protect. In his mind, this was all part of the plan. If she loved him, she would stay. But the longer he played this twisted game, the more he risked losing her entirely. Olivia, trapped in a storm of conflicting emotions, began to question everything. Was she in love with Nathaniel still, or had his actions pushed her to a breaking point? She had always supported him, but now it felt as though she was being pushed into a corner, forced to prove herself in ways that weren't fair. As the days wore on, it was clear that something had to give. Nathaniel's plan to test Olivia's loyalty had backfired. The strain of his manipulative behavior was beginning to unravel everything they had built. What neither of them realized, however, was that the true test of their relationship was yet to come, and it would reveal truths neither of them were prepared to face. The tension between Nathaniel and Olivia reached a boiling point one stormy evening. The sky outside their mansion was a swirling mass of dark clouds, and the wind howled through the trees as the rain lashed against the windows. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. It was as if the storm outside mirrored the tempest brewing between them. Nathaniel lay in his bed, his eyes fixed on Olivia, who was sitting in the chair beside him. She had been growing more distant, less engaged with him. The occasional kindness she offered felt forced, and her eyes no longer carried the warmth they once had. Instead, they were filled with something he couldn't quite place. Sadness, perhaps? Frustration? He couldn't stand it. He had tested her loyalty in every possible way, but no matter what he did, it felt like he was losing her. The silent battle between them had been escalating for days. Nathaniel's paranoia had reached its peak. Every word Olivia spoke, every action she took, seemed to fuel his doubts. The man who had once been so confident, so assured in his power, now found himself consumed by fear. The fear that she was slipping away, that the life they had built was on the verge of collapse. That night, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He needed to know, he needed to hear it from her. "Olivia," he said, his voice breaking the heavy silence, "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I need to know right now, do you still love me? Are you still here for me? Or have you already moved on?" Olivia looked at him, her heart racing, unsure how to respond. The question hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She had been patient, understanding, caring, but this was a line she hadn't expected to cross. Nathaniel's words were like daggers, piercing through the protective walls she had built around herself. "I, Nathaniel, of course I still love you," she replied, her voice trembling. But as she said it, something in her felt hollow. She had spent so much time taking care of him, supporting him, and now she was starting to wonder if she was losing herself in the process. Was her love for him enough to endure this constant manipulation, this emotional blackmail? She hesitated, feeling the weight of her own thoughts pressing down on her. She had spent years loving this man, building a family with him, but this was different. His need for constant validation, his doubts about her loyalty, it was suffocating. She felt like she was drowning in his insecurities, and a part of her was starting to question whether she could survive it. "Nathaniel, you don't need to test me like this," Olivia said softly. the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I've been here for you. I've cared for you. Don't you see that?" Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, his lips tightening into a thin line. The words stung, but it wasn't the sting of hurt. No, it was something worse. It was the sting of fear, the fear that he had lost control. He wanted to believe her, but the nagging voice in his head refused to let him. "I don't know if I can believe that anymore," he whispered, his voice barely audible, as if admitting his own vulnerability would expose him to the world. "I don't know if I can believe in anything anymore." Olivia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The room felt too small, too confining. The storm outside raged louder, matching the chaos inside her. She couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. She had to find herself again before it was too late. "I can't keep doing this, Nathaniel," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm here, I'm taking care of you, but I don't know who I am anymore. This isn't what I signed up for." Nathaniel's heart sank. He had pushed her to this point. His test, his game, had driven her away. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had spent all this time trying to protect himself from losing her, but in the process, he had lost her already. In that moment, something inside him snapped. The facade he had carefully built of control, of power, of dominance began to crumble. He realized that in trying to test Olivia, he had tested himself. And the truth was, he was more afraid of losing her than he had ever been of losing his fortune, his empire, or his status. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at Olivia, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Olivia didn't know how to respond. She had spent so much time giving and giving, but now she felt like she was being pulled in two different directions. She loved him, but she couldn't live like this, constantly proving her loyalty, constantly living in the shadow of his insecurities. "I need space," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tears that were now streaming down her face. "I need to figure out who I am without you, without all this, without the test." For the first time in their relationship, Nathaniel felt completely powerless. As Olivia walked toward the door, he watched her go, feeling the weight of his own actions crushing him. The game he had played, the test he had set up to prove her loyalty, had backfired. And now he was faced with the terrifying reality. He might have just lost the one person who had ever truly loved him. The days after Olivia's departure felt like an eternity to Nathaniel. The mansion that had once been filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of a loving wife now felt cold and hollow. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind a whirlwind of regret. Every inch of his body screamed in agony, not from the injuries that had been staged, but from the self-inflicted wounds of his own actions. His plan to test Olivia had spiraled out of control in ways he never imagined. He had pushed her too far, shattered the trust they once had, and now the distance between them felt insurmountable. Each day he found himself replaying every moment, every word, every glance. He remembered how she had once looked at him with adoration, how she had stood by his side through every trial and tribulation. Now all he saw was the pain in her eyes, the doubt, the sorrow. Olivia hadn't just left him physically. She had emotionally withdrawn in ways he couldn't have predicted. The house felt empty without her presence, and the weight of her absence was suffocating. The realization that he had been the one to drive her away, that it was his own insecurities and manipulations that had torn them apart, was unbearable. Nathaniel's life had always been about control over his empire, over his wealth, over his image. But here, in the silence of the mansion, he realized that he had never truly controlled his relationship. It wasn't his money, his status, or his power that had kept Olivia by his side. It had been trust, love, and mutual respect, all things he had overlooked in his quest for reassurance. In the days following Olivia's departure, Nathaniel tried to reach out. He called, he sent texts, and he even had his assistants track her down, but Olivia was distant, unreachable. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to hear him. She was lost in her own pain, her own confusion, just as he was in his. But then one evening a message arrived. It wasn't from Olivia directly, but from a mutual friend. The message was simple, but it hit Nathaniel like a ton of bricks. Olivia is staying with an old friend. She's trying to find peace. She needs time to heal. But, Nathaniel, you need to understand, this isn't just about you. It's about her, too. She's been carrying the weight of your insecurities for far too long, and now she's taking a step back to figure out what she needs. The words stung, but they were also a wake-up call. Olivia wasn't just running away from him, she was running toward herself, toward healing, toward reclaiming a sense of self that had been buried under the weight of his neediness. She wasn't the one who had changed, it was him. His fear and control had poisoned the very thing he had been trying to protect. For the first time, Nathaniel felt truly alone. The empire he had spent years building felt irrelevant. His fortune, his business achievements, all of it seemed meaningless now. None of it could fix what he had broken. That night, Nathaniel sat in his study, staring at the photos of him and Olivia from happier days. He saw the love in her eyes, the trust, the hope. How had it all gone so wrong? He realized that he had never truly listened to her needs, never truly understood her. He had been too focused on proving his worth, on testing her loyalty, that he had failed to recognize the love she had always given him. The storm inside him mirrored the one outside. He was lost. But in the midst of this darkness, something shifted within him. The realization was clear. He needed to change. He couldn't just sit back and let things fall apart. If he wanted to save what little remained of their relationship, he had to be the one to make the first move. But it wouldn't be easy. He knew that. The damage was deep. It wasn't just about proving his loyalty to her anymore. It was about proving to himself that he could change, that he could become the man she needed, not the one he had been pretending to be. The turning point had come, and Nathaniel knew that he was at a crossroads. The question wasn't whether he could win Olivia back, it was whether he was willing to face his own demons and grow beyond his insecurities. Only then could he even hope to rebuild what had been shattered. And so, Nathaniel made a decision. He would fight, not with money, not with power, but with vulnerability, with honesty, and with a willingness to change. Whether it was enough to win Olivia back, he didn't know. But he was finally ready to face the consequences of his actions and take the first step toward redemption. It had been weeks since Olivia left, but Nathaniel's mind was still consumed with her absence. He spent every waking moment replaying his mistakes, trying to find a way to fix what he had broken. The house was still cold and empty, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time in his life, he realized that his wealth, his control, and his arrogance had never been the foundation of a meaningful life. Love, trust, and understanding were. He had to change, or he would lose everything. One night, as Nathaniel sat in the study, he made a decision. He wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. He knew that Olivia was still hurting, still searching for herself, and he had to give her space. But he also knew that he couldn't sit idly by and let her slip out of his life for good. This wasn't just about his desire to get her back. It was about truly understanding her, respecting her, and becoming a better man, not for her, but for himself. Nathaniel booked a flight to the small town where Olivia had been staying. He didn't tell her. He didn't ask for permission. This wasn't a power play. It was a last-ditch effort to show her that he was serious about change. He had been the one to break their relationship. Now, he was determined to take responsibility for his actions and face her, vulnerable, raw, and willing to make amends. The flight was long, but Nathaniel barely noticed. His mind was focused on one thing, making it right. When he finally arrived in the small town, it felt like everything he had ever known. His empire, his wealth, his identity was far away. It was just him now, standing at the edge of a new beginning, with no guarantees. Olivia was staying in a modest cabin on the outskirts of town. Nathaniel knew where she was from a friend who had been keeping him updated. He didn't call ahead. He didn't want to tip her off. He needed her to see him, truly see him, without any pretensions. As he stood at the door of the cabin, his hand hovering over the doorknob, his heart raced. The old Nathaniel, the confident and vulnerable billionaire, was gone. In his place was a man who was terrified of rejection, who was filled with doubt and remorse, but this was his only chance. He couldn't go back to the life he had before. This wasn't just about Olivia anymore. It was about his own growth, his own healing. He knocked. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Olivia stood before him, her eyes wide with surprise, but there was no anger in them, only exhaustion and sadness. It had been so long since he had seen her like this, so vulnerable, so raw. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she was dressed in casual clothes. The woman he had once known seemed so far away now. She was not the polished, perfect image of a billionaire's wife he had tried to control. She was just Olivia. "Olivia," Nathaniel said, his voice trembling, "I know I've hurt you. I've been a coward. I've been testing you, pushing you, and I've ignored everything that truly matters. But I want you to know I'm here now, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that I can change." Olivia didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Nathaniel thought he had made a mistake, that she would turn him away and slam the door in his face. But then, slowly, she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," she said softly. Nathaniel hesitated, but then stepped inside. The air between them was thick, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. He could feel the tension, the miles of distance that had formed between them, but he also felt something else, an undeniable hope. A hope that, just maybe, they could start over. He sat down on the couch, and Olivia followed suit. The silence stretched out, neither of them knowing exactly where to begin. Finally, it was Olivia who spoke first. "Nathaniel," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know if we can go back to how things were. You hurt me. You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I had to prove myself to you. But more than that, I had to lose myself to keep you happy. I can't do that anymore." The words stung, but Nathaniel knew they were true. His own actions had pushed her to this point. But now, as he looked at her, he realized something he had never fully understood before. This wasn't just about him. It was about her, too. She had her own needs, her own identity, and he had to respect that. "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never understood what you needed. I was too caught up in my own fears to see the damage I was causing. But I see it now. I see you, and I'm willing to do the work, to be the man you deserve. I know it's going to take time, and I know I can't erase the past, but I want to try, if you'll let me." Olivia looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the raw vulnerability that had once been hidden behind arrogance and control. This wasn't the man she had married, but maybe, just maybe, it could be the man she needed now. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "but I'll listen. I'll give you the chance to prove it." Nathaniel nodded, his heart heavy with gratitude and relief. He knew this wasn't the end of their journey. It was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the right path. This time, he wasn't just fighting for her love. He was fighting for himself, too. As they sat together, the silence between them felt less suffocating. It wasn't the resolution they both needed, but it was a start, a fragile step toward healing, toward rebuilding trust, toward creating a future together, one where love wasn't tested, but freely given. The storm outside had passed, and though the sky was still overcast, the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the clouds. It was a sign. The future, though uncertain, held promise, and for the first time in a long time, Nathaniel felt like he might be able to face it. Days turned into weeks, and the journey toward healing was slow but steady. Nathaniel and Olivia were no longer living in the shadows of mistrust. The road was not easy, and at times the weight of their past mistakes threatened to pull them under. But both were determined to make it work, each in their own way, each learning and growing together. Nathaniel had never known a love like this. It wasn't about control or power anymore. It was about listening, about understanding, and most importantly, about giving Olivia the space she needed to find herself again. He worked hard to prove to her that he wasn't the man he once was, the man who had manipulated her, tested her, and taken her love for granted. Olivia, too, began to rediscover who she was outside of her role as his wife. For the first time in years, she stopped trying to fix Nathaniel. She focused on herself, her own needs, and her own healing. She found strength in her independence, and though it wasn't always easy, she learned to trust herself again. There were days when they would sit together in silence, the weight of their shared history between them. But it wasn't an oppressive silence anymore. It was a space they shared, one where both of them could simply exist without the need for constant validation or reassurance. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset, Nathaniel turned to Olivia, his voice soft but filled with meaning. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me the chance to make things right. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful you're still here with me." Olivia looked at him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It had taken time, but she could see the man he was becoming, not the one he had been. She had learned to forgive him, but more importantly, she had learned to forgive herself for allowing herself to be trapped in the cycle of his insecurities, for neglecting her own voice. "You're welcome," she replied quietly, "but you didn't just change for me. You changed for yourself, and that's what matters." Nathaniel nodded, understanding the truth in her words. He had always relied on external validation to feel worthy, but now he knew that true worth came from within, from being at peace with oneself and honoring the ones you love. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but it was no longer clouded by the shadows of doubt and manipulation. They had faced the storm and come through it stronger, more aware of each other's vulnerabilities, and more committed to being the partners they were meant to be. In the end, it wasn't the billionaire's empire that defined Nathaniel. It was the relationship he had with Olivia. It wasn't the money, the power, or the control that mattered. What mattered was the love they had built from the rubble of their mistakes. And though the road to redemption had been long and filled with hardship, it was worth every step. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over their world, Nathaniel reached for Olivia's hand. They had both been tested in ways they never anticipated, but together they had overcome. And for the first time in a long time, Nathaniel knew he was finally free, free from his own insecurities, free to love, to trust, and to live. And as he looked into Olivia's eyes, he knew that, with her by his side, anything was possible. The storm had passed, and in its wake they found something more lasting, a love that wasn't based on tests, but on the raw, beautiful truth of who they both were.